Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. Today I have prepared a new kind of video for you. A video where I asked all of my subscribers to send me pictures and videos of their tanks for me to review them. And today is the day where we finally see the result of this project. I will review 3 very different tanks with very different sizes. All of them are freshwater, planted ecosystem tanks, I would say, more or less, but in very different dimensions. We have the smallest one with 2 gallons. That is probably the least animal-friendly tank I have ever seen. We have one that is medium-sized, I would say, an average-sized tank that is super nice for the fish and animals that are in there. And we have a massive monster tank with rather small fish, but a super interesting community setup. I will review the tanks in 3 different categories. The first category will be costs and complexity, because I like to keep things cheap as possible, and as simple as possible. So the simpler, the cheaper, the better. This category will be rated on a scale from 0 to 5, with 5 being the cheapest and simplest setup. Then the next category will be style and look. If a tank looks super nice, super stylish in my opinion, it will get 5 out of 5 points. If it doesn't look great, it will get a lower grade. And then the last and most important category is fish and animal well-being. I will try to assess how well each setup fits all its inhabitants. And this category will be graded on a scale from 0 to 10, because I feel like this is the most important category, because in the end, we only have a good tank if our animals feel fine. And now, without further ado, let's start with the first tank. The first tank is a special one. It was sent by one of my newest channel members, Yoshi. I will try to link their YouTube channels and their handles in the description if you want to check them out. He shared his 60 liter or 15 to 16 gallon tank if you are from the USA. It's a 60 liter cube tank. That means all the sides have the same length. It uses a Tetra EX 500 filter. This is a filter that is set up originally for aquariums with a volume of up to 100 liters. So roughly twice the volume of water that Yoshi actually has, which is a bit outsized or oversized, but this is actually good, right? If we have more water volume going through the filter, if we have more filter capacity, that is usually good for the water quality, because you just have a faster water cycle. He uses a Cheerios universal RGB light, which is a light that you can dim at the beginning and at the end of each day. So at dusk and dawn, you can dim it, which I have personally never used, but I feel like it's a nice and natural way to wake up and let your fish fall asleep again. I feel like it's the most natural way, probably. Although at the equator, you probably don't have that too much. Their dusk and dawn are pretty short periods, but at least here in temperate zones, we have a long period of dusk and a long period of dawn. So it's more natural if you dim the light at the morning and dim it at the evening again before you turn it off. Now, he does have some rather sophisticated technical setup, I would say. He has a CO2 fertilization by SodaFix. I don't know the brand. I've never had any CO2 fertilization in my tanks, which is amazing for his plants, and we will talk about his plants in a moment, but it adds to the costs and to the technical complexity. So it probably will be reducing some of the rating later. Let's look at his plans. So Yoshi was super kind. He sent me a nice and edited video already, which I highly appreciate. Thanks, Yoshi. And he told me in total that he has, I think, 10 or 11 different plant species. And I want to go over the species quickly right now. So let me quickly see, because I couldn't remember all of the plants. But most of them I try to summarize now. He has different kinds of cryptocorines. So he has, for instance, cryptocorine pava and cryptocorine pink flamingo, which are just the retail names, I think. Those crypts, they usually grow without CO2 fertilization, so they would even grow in my tank, and you can even see my cryptocorine undulata plants here on the left-hand side of the tank. So cryptocorines are usually quite hardy, and they usually tolerate a vast amount of water parameters. Although I only kept cryptocorine venti green and cryptocorine undulata, in Yoshi's case, he keeps the cryptocorine pava and pink flamingo varieties. And what I heard is that his pink flamingo variety is not as red yet. And this may be due to them needing to settle in, first of all. Then he has a Bucephalandra plant, the Bucephalandra pygmea bukit kelam variety he mentioned, which is a plant that grows well without CO2 fertilization, and it's super small. It's a super tiny plant, so it is ideal for these nano-sized tanks. I would say nano tank or small tank, and I mean nano tanks go down to 10 liters and 4 gallons. It's a small tank. It's definitely on a smaller side. It's not necessarily a nano tank though. He also has some Christmas moss, which is beneficial for the fish he keeps. He keeps celestial pearl danios and other fish. We will dive into the fish deeper in a minute, but the Christmas moss is very beneficial for the celestial pearl danios. It's often recommended on the internet if you read Reddit and other forums that the CPDs, the celestial pearl danios, they really like Christmas moss and other kind of fine-leaved plants. Then Yoshi also keeps Anubias baterinana, which is a typical mini-sized Anubias variety, which I really like. I keep them not in this tank. I kept them in this tank. I tried to keep them there. For some reason, they didn't really grow well, but I keep them in my other larger tank in my Amazon or South America tank, which I posted a video about last week. He also keeps Alternatera ruby red and Rotala rotundifolia, which are both plants that develop red leaves after some time, and both of them require large amounts of CO2. So I think you would probably not be able to keep them alive for extended periods of time if you didn't have a CO2 fertilization. He also keeps Cryptocorain crispantula, the Balancia variety. These names are super difficult for me to pronounce, so bear with me. Which is a plant that can grow extremely tall for such a small tank. So it doesn't grow necessarily super tall, not like the plants you see in the back here, the Australian giant Vallisneria plants, for instance, or the Limnophilia sessiflora plants. These grow really, really tall. But still, in such a small 60-liter or 15-gallon tank, this is a plant that could quickly outgrow this tank if not maintained frequently. Then he also keeps Idiocharis vivipara, which is a nice background plant. It benefits from CO2, but it can definitely grow without CO2 fertilization. And then, last but not least, we have Salvinia minima, which is a floating plant, which is amazing to keep nitrates in control. You can just scoop it out every now and then, and by that control the nitrate concentration in your tank, and it creates some shade, and the fish usually really appreciate having that kind of floating plant, no matter really which kind of floating plant you keep. Now, we come to the most interesting part, for me at least, and probably also for you guys, the fish and animals that Yoshi keeps. So Yoshi told me that he has red racer nerite snails, which are snails that I've kept myself in this tank. Fortunately, they were killed by my assassin snails, which was something that I didn't foresee when I added the assassin snails. But anyways, in Yoshi's tank, they are a really nice addition. They are really nice for this volume of water because they are rather small snails, or rather small variety of the nerite snails. They're absolutely beautiful. I love red racer nerite snails. Another snail that I haven't kept in maybe 8 years, but that is absolutely cool, is the horned nerite snail. It looks rather similar to the red racer nerites. It's a little less colorful, I would say, but it has these horns. And the horns are just, they look prehistoric and super cool. I really like those. Then the main fish with regards to the number of the individuals is the CPD, the Celestial Pearl Danio. I briefly mentioned this fish before. This is probably the perfect fish for this volume of water. It stays very small. They reach a size that is not larger than this. They are very perfectly suited for this kind of tank. So they like the planted tank. They like the very small filamentous plants or filamentous leaves of the plants. And they really enjoy that cover that he creates with this kind of rocks and with these kind of root formations here. He also has 4 Groking gouramis. They don't get larger than 6 to 7 centimeters or 2 to 2.5 inches, which I would argue is a little large for that tank. So Croaking gouramis, I read, can get quite territorial, which is could lead to a problem. Yoshi mentioned in the video, in his voiceover, that in his tank there's one more, let's say, dominant pair of croaking gouramis and one less dominant pair, or individual rather, which probably helps moderating that. So that's not that big of an issue, but they can get territorial. And probably you have to watch out if they get too territorial and mess with each other, maybe change the setup of your tank a little bit, or add them to another tank. But as long as this is not a problem, I think it should be fine. And then last but not least, we have one more fish in this tank, which is one of my favorite fish to keep in my aquariums. It's the coolie loach. It's not a black coolie loach that I like to keep, which frequently snack on my guppy fry. It's the normal coolie loach with the typical, I would say, zebra pattern. It's kept in a 60-liter, 15-gallon tank, and there are 6 coolie loaches in there. And the 60-liter or 15 gallons is the absolute minimum for keeping coolie loaches. It's probably even a little too less. I would recommend keeping them in a 100-liter, or even like I do in a 240-liter, 63-gallon setup. They, in my opinion, also need a sandy bottom because they really like to sift through sand. And what Yoshi has is close to sand, but it's not really sand. It's more like a fine grain or something, which is also not super natural for them. They like to be kept in groups, which Yoshi does. So he has 6 specimens, and they are very young. So they are not fully matured yet. So probably the size of the tank is totally fine at this stage. But I would recommend actually getting a larger tank for them once they are fully grown, especially if you have 6 of them in one tank. Now, let's talk about the rating of Yoshi's tank. I would give him a 3 out of 5 for costs and complexity, mainly because of the CO2 fertilization. I'm not the biggest fan. I mean, I've mentioned this multiple times on my channel. I'm not the biggest fan of CO2 fertilization, mainly because it's costly and I don't like to add additional costs. It already costs a lot, our hobby, so no need to add additional costs here. Style look, I would give it a 4 out of 5. I really like that he has 11 plants. I really like the composition of fish, style-wise, or let's say color-wise, and of the plants. What I would appreciate is if he had more plants with regards to the mass of plants. You can see I like my plants, I like my tanks heavily planted, so that the fish can swim through a more or less a forest of plants. It has the downside that you don't see all of the fish all of the time, but it's definitely more healthy for the water quality. And for me personally, it's a nicer style and a more natural look, I would say. And then I would give him an 8 out of 10, so super good grade for animal and fish health. The Celestial Pearl Danios and the Gouramis are probably perfect for this tank, with one small caveat that probably there could be some territorial difficulties between the different Gouramis. Other than that, it's perfect. I would maybe add 2 or 3 more CPDs, just so you have a nice swarm of 10. That's what I aim for with swarmfish usually. And I would add sand, so the coolie loaches feel more at home in your tank. But that's the only small thing. So in total, I would say with the exception of the coolie loaches, perfect tank, perfect setup. 15 out of 20 points in total for Yoshi's tank. Let's jump to the next one. Now, our next tank is an absolute monster tank compared to Yoshi's tank that we just discussed. Mr. Watson Aquatic sent it, and he's a long-time follower of my channel, which is highly appreciated. I think he's been following the channel for over a year now, and he's always been very active in the comments. He's been very active on my live streams, which unfortunately I couldn't do in the last few weeks and months. But he's been a super dedicated and active follower, and I highly appreciate it. So I knew when he sent some footage of his tank, I had to share it with you guys. You can also check out his channel. He posted several videos of his aquariums, let's say, edited, like less edited compared to my videos, but still very interesting tanks, very interesting videos, and very interesting fish. Why do I consider his tank to be a monster tank compared to Yoshi's? It's a DD Aqua 15 tank that is originally a saltwater tank. And Mr. Watson Aquatic scored the tank, I think, on eBay or from a friend. He mentioned it in the video he sent me for 150 pounds. For 150 pounds, sorry. He's from Britain, that's why they have everything in British pounds. And he converted it to a freshwater tank, but it still has this typical saltwater size and dimensions. It's massive. It is a 550 liter, that's 145 gallon tank. So all my tanks combined are not as big as this one tank of Mr. Watson, which is just amazing for the fish. I probably couldn't fit it in my apartment because I'm afraid that the ceiling would break. But anyways, it's a massive tank. It has a massive sump system. It is rather normal to have a sump system in a saltwater tank, but it's completely new to me. So I'm just showing you the footage here that Mr. Watson was so kind to share. It has some filter socks, some sponges, and some alpha grog, which is a biomedia that has a huge surface area for keeping filter bacteria, basically, and all the biome that keeps your aquarium healthy, basically. He also has a UV filter system that kills pathogens and algae, which is benefits, and he has AQQA lights that he bought from Amazon on top of this tank, and two of them massive lights. So technically, the tank would be probably on the more costly and more complex side, in my opinion. But since he bought most of it on eBay or secondhand, it's probably even cheaper than the previous tank that we had a look at. Now, it's a 550 liter, 145 gallon dirted tank, which is perfect for the plants that Mr. Watson keeps. And it's more or less also what I do. So he mentioned in the video that he has a base layer of pond soil and on top of that a sand layer, which I usually also do. He also keeps different kinds of roots in the tank, just like I do, and some kind of river rocks. They look like they were originally in a river because they have a rather rounded shape. He has 4 different kinds of plants that I could identify, also with the help of his comment. First and foremost, he has Amazon swords. Amazon swords grow massively with that kind of space and volume of water and in that kind of substrate. And they grow completely without CO2. He also doesn't have a CO2 fertilization, at least as far as I understood from looking at the video. He has some kind of aquarium grass. I could not identify the species. Maybe one of you can and can comment below, or maybe Mr. Watson can if he watches the video. Without CO2, I'm afraid that they probably will not grow as dense as you would like them to grow, these plants. They are supposed to look like a lawn, basically, right? But without CO2, I think they won't, to be honest. I kept multiple kinds of grasses in my aquariums, and I was never successful at having them even slightly grow. They always started to melt away, and then other plants grew over it, or my snails dug them out, or my fish ate them. So I was never really happy with aquarium grass. But I like how it looks at the moment. I don't know how new the tank is. That's maybe something that I should add in the next kind of questionnaire that I put out there. But it looks rather new to me. He also has Limnophilia sessiflora, and Limnophilia sessiflora is one of my all-time favorites. It's a plant that grows rather massively, I mean, in aquarium dimensions, and I keep it in my tank here, here, and there as well. And I just cut it back. I just trimmed them. You need to constantly trim them, even in a tank without CO2. It will outgrow almost anything else, at least that I know. He also keeps water lettuce on the surface of his tank, which is a typical floater plant, I would say. I've never kept it myself, but what I read is that it grows similarly to Amazon frogbit. It provides shading for the fish, which is super beneficial. It's also beneficial for nitrate export. So nitrite and nitrate accumulate when your fish poo, basically. And the floating plants usually help at growing very fast. They take nitrates for that. And when you take it out, you basically extract that or export it out of the tank. It takes carbon or CO2 from the air, so it doesn't need active CO2 fertilization. And it's very comparable to the Amazon frogbit I keep in my planted tank back there. So when it comes to fish, Mr. Watson has a super cool composition of fish. At the beginning, I thought maybe it's a little too much with regards to bioload because he keeps tons of fish in there. But when I first had a look at the video, I thought it was a 150 liter tank because of the aquarium name. But it's a little misleading. It's a 550 liter, 145 gallon tank, so there's plenty of space for fish. And if you take that into consideration, I think the stocking is amazing because usually guppies are kept in very small tanks and these smaller swarmfish also. And I think this is often very bad for the fish. And we will see an example of that in the last review. So keep watching because the last video is a negative example, I would say. So we have guppies, antlers, just like in my tank, and mollies. I think it's not black mollies, I think it's some kind of diamond molly or something like this, which are absolutely perfect for this tank. I mean, you give a guppy 550 liters of swimming space, it's probably more than it would even get in the wild in like a small creek or river. It's perfect for these fish, and also they look very healthy. The fact that they reproduced is always good for guppies. I mean, guppies rarely don't reproduce, I would say, but also the grown-ups look extremely healthy, extremely good. Then we have free perguramis. They are highly suitable for this 550 liter volume. They are species that can reach their full size in this kind of volume and that will show the natural behavior. So this is also, first of all, it's a super beautiful fish, and it's nice that it has the swimming space. We have a Hoplo catfish, a catfish that I've personally never kept before. They are highly active. They need a massive floor space to swim and massive room to swim because they always swim around. I had a closely related, I think, Congo catfish 15 years ago, and they really need massive space. So you really need a huge tank for those fish to feel healthy and feel fine. Mr. Watson also keeps a yo-yo lodge, a yo-yo lodge, and yo-yo lodges like to be kept in groups. So that's one thing where I would probably give him one point less than the maximum amount of points for animal health, because in terms of volume, it's nice. Often yo-yo lodges are sold for smaller aquariums because people at the fish stores just don't know how big they will get, but they get quite massive. And in this case, the water volume is totally fine, but I would just add one or two more because they like to swim in groups, right? They like to live in groups. They are rather social species. Then we have a really nice addition with a familiar name, the German ram. I mean, I'm a German dude, and this is a German ram, so very nice. Unfortunately, Mr. Watson said he added these German rams 2 days ago, and one of them passed away instantly. That often happens, but it's a shame. It's part of the hobby, I would say. Something similar happened to me in my 200 liter or 50 gallon tank where I added 2 Apistogramma, so dwarf cichlids. I don't know why. One of them is still alive since more than half a year, and one of them just passed away, unfortunately, like 2 months in. In Mr. Watson's case, the German blue ram passed away way faster. Could have been the fish was damaged during transport or was already weak when he bought it. We don't know, but I would probably get another one once this one has settled in. Because also they like to live in groups or in pairs rather. They can be territorial, but you should keep them in groups of 2 at least. Then he has Otocinclus and Amano shrimp, classic cleanup crew. I have both of them in my tank back there as well. That's why probably the tank is also rather algae free. I mean, the UV probably helps, the SUM filter helps, and also the Otocinclus and the Amano shrimp. They probably won't reproduce in this tank, unlike the guppy and black mollies, which are also big algae eaters, but they are just like more or less the standard cleanup crew in such a tank. Last but not least, he also keeps some snails, some ramshorn snails. Ramshorn snails are a super nice kind of snail. I keep them not in this tank because I have my assassin snails in there, but I keep them in my South America tank. And in this tank, they overpopulated it quite quickly. But in Mr. Watson's tank, I wouldn't say that this is the case at all. So definitely, it looks like the feeding is on point. He doesn't overfeed, he doesn't underfeed. The fish look very healthy. The plants look very healthy, and overall the tank looks super nice. So let's get to the rating. I would say costs and complexity. I would have originally given it a 2 out of 5 because it's a massive tank. It's probably extremely costly. You don't need a SUM filter. You probably don't need this UV filtration. But since he got it from eBay, I would still give him 4 out of 5 points. So almost maximum, because still it's a costly tank, right? But it's secondhand, so it's still very cost effective. The style and look is a 4 out of 5 for me, and for the same reason that I gave a 4 out of 5 to Yoshi's tank. I think the tank looks pretty, but I think the plants need to grow in. I think in like a few months the plants will have grown to a size where you have like a real forest look, underwater forest look, which then is just more appealing for me. I'm not saying it looks bad, not at all. It looks amazing. Also the kind of the spider wood that he added and the river stones are really nice. Although he mentioned in the video that he bought them from the fish store, I would never do that. I would just go to a local river and basically steal them, which I probably shouldn't say on YouTube, but anyways. So for style and look, I would give the tank a 4 out of 5 as well. And then for animal and fish health, I would give the tank a 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10 because it's a massive tank. Most species that are in there feel extremely good in such a big volume of water, which is amazing. He has tons of hiding spaces. He has the spider wood, he has the rocks, he has the plants, which is amazing. But he only has one German blue ram and only one yo-yo loach. I would just get like some mates for these fish, and then it's for me a 10 out of 10. So in total, a 17 out of 20 score for Mr. Watson. And now the last tank that we will have a look at is Gitarta's tank. I couldn't link his channel because I don't know which channel was linked to his email. That's why I couldn't link the channel. But anyways, here's the video. It's not the best quality video, but anyways, I'm going to show it. I don't know the exact measurements. It's a bowl with 8 liters, 2 gallons maximum. It could be 1.5 gallons or 5 liters, but I don't know. I just had to eyeball it roughly. It's actually pretty nicely planted. It's mostly stem plants. Unfortunately, Gitarta did not mention which kind of plants he keeps in there, but I bet that the red plant is a Ludwigia glandulosa plant and some other stem plants. He has one huge shrimp in the bowl. Sometimes the reflection of the glass amplifies the size of the animals or let the animals appear larger than they actually are, but still, this shrimp is quite massive for that small bowl. And I think it's actually way too large for that small setup. It's, I think, a Neocaridina davidi shrimp. I cannot tell 100%, but it looks very familiar for me, and it looks very similar to my Neocaridina davidi shrimp. Gitarta also shared some pictures with me showing the development of this bowl over the last 3 years since 2023. And I was a bit surprised when I saw these pictures because honestly, I wouldn't keep fish in such a small enclosure. He, on one picture, had a beautiful planted setup where I would put this on my office desk. It looks absolutely stunning, absolutely beautiful. So I would give him also 5 out of 5 points for style and for costs because the tank or the glass bowl ecosystem, considering the small size, looks actually quite cool, and it's dirt cheap to do this. You don't need any dedicated aquarium material for it. Just some plants that you maybe get from eBay for free. But when you look closely in this picture, there's a small guppy in there, and only one guppy male as it looks. And this is something that I would never recommend or never do. This is like the typical thing that people did in the 70s, 80s, where they put a goldfish in such a glass. Of course, the fish are hardy, so both goldfish and also the guppy fish, they are hardy. They will survive some weeks, some months, maybe even a year, but at one point they will die because it's not enough space. And what it means is that the nitrites and nitrates will build up and basically more or less suffocate the fish. Also, come on, it's such a small space. It must be extremely boring for that fish and understimulating, let's say. There was also at one point a gourami in this tank, which is way too big. The smallest gourami out there gets like 4 to 5 centimeters or 1 to 2 inches large. And this is just way too large for such a small enclosure. Of course, the fish will survive for some weeks, but I would recommend not to put any fish in there. The largest animal that I would put in there is maybe snail. That's totally fine. Snails don't need as much space. They don't swim actually, and they are way less developed compared to fish. So I would kindly ask you to not put another fish in there. Also, the fact that he sent me pictures from 2023, 2024, 2025, and each time another large animal was in there. Like first of all the guppy, then the Neocaridina shrimp, and then the gourami. tells me that probably the animals passed away and then he just added new ones. So this is something that I would ask you, please put fish and shrimp only in larger, like at least 20 liters. What would that be? Maybe like 5 gallons, 8 gallons tanks. Even that is on the very small end, I would say, or minimum end. So when it comes to the rating of this tank, I would give it a 5 out of 5 for cost and complexity, because it is quite easy to set up. It is quite simple and it looks actually quite good. Especially that point in time where the bowl or the enclosure had these plants growing out of it. I really like that and I really appreciate that, and kudos where kudos is due. Style, I would give a 4 out of 5. As I said, it looked cool at one point, it looked super cool at another point, and then it looked a little messed up at today's point in time. And then for animal health, I have to give it a 0 out of 10, because this is just not a sustainable and nice way to keep animals. So in total, the tank gets a 9 out of 20, which is the place or rank 3 in today's ranking. Rank 2 is Yoshi's tank that we saw at the beginning. It gets 15 out of 20 points, so actually super good rating. Thank you, Yoshi, so much for sending your tanks or pictures of your tank. And the first place is Mr. Watson. It's 17 out of 20 points for Mr. Watson's tank. And again, this is a very subjective opinion of me. I've kept fish for almost 20 years now, but still it's a rather subjective opinion. But still, I would be so curious to hear what you guys think about these tanks. Do you like them? What do you like? What do you dislike? Please add it in the comments below. I'm sure that Gitata, Yoshi, and Mr. Watson will also join the comments and probably interact with you guys, so you can also directly ask them questions and just discuss what you liked about the tanks and what you would change. Also, if you want to submit your own tank, please check out the link below or the QR code here and send me your tank through the form below. I would kindly ask you to first send me a picture of your tank and your email address, and if I think the tank looks interesting, then I will contact you and write you a quick email and ask you to upload a short video on my Google Drive. You don't need to pay anything, just upload it. The storage is paid for by me, and then I will create a video about it. And thanks at this point also for all the channel members. I will put them right here. Especially Yoshi. I mean, the fact that you joined the Tetra gang and spent each month $1 for supporting my work is amazing. And the fact that you, on top of that, even shared a video about your tank is even more amazing. Thank you for that, and thanks for all the other members in the Tetra and the Guppy gang. If you want to join the Tetra or the Guppy gang, feel free to do so here or in the link in the description. And if you enjoyed this video, I'm sure you would enjoy seeing how this tank, the Jewel Rio 240, developed over the last 1.5 years, which I will link here or this video here. Thanks for watching.